What are some very creepy facts? If you get a blood transfusion and get the wrong type of blood, A, B, O, AB, one of the symptoms is a sense of impending doom. There's a tiny little jellyfish which can induce the same sensation of impending doom, along with some serious pain and likely hospitalization. It's only tiny as well, about the size of a fingernail, although the tentacles are much longer, maybe about a meter long. It's called the Irukandji jellyfish. The Colombian serial killer Pedro Alonso Lopez, who is known as the Monster of the Andes, and murdered over 300 girls from Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia. However, after he was caught and imprisoned for 18 years, he was put in a psychiatric hospital. There he was reviewed, declared to be sane and was set free, in spite of his blatant avowal that he fully intends to kill again. Since he was released in 1998, nobody knows where he is or what he's doing. He is supposed to be 71 years old at present. He is known for being the most prolific killer ever. That's terrifying. How would one come to the conclusion that he was rehabilitated with such a severity of his acts? If I'm not mistaken, Colombia doesn't give life sentences for anything. I believe the limit is 30 years. There is a genetic disease called fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva. When tissue is damaged, it is replaced with bone. Growths form underneath their skin and their joints lock solid, so over time those affected slowly become encased in a prison of bone just beneath their own skin. They usually have to choose between sitting or standing up for the rest of their life. By the end of their life they have to drink every meal through a straw and can barely move. And removing the excess bone with surgery is no option either, because the injuries from the surgery will create even more bone. Somehow this is worse than the original comment. Bacteria and viruses can be frozen for millions of years and still be viably infectious, and having never encountered humanity before, could have no end of catastrophic results should they be uncovered and manage to infect a person or animal. Not to worry though, it's not like millions of ancient pathogens are currently trapped in permafrost, which is now melting bit by bit each and every day. Your eyes have a separate immune system from the rest of your body. If they get damaged in such a way that it affects anything other than your eyes, your regular immune system can attack the damage and will not recognize them, meaning your own body can permanently blind you. What's worse, your body cannot tell the difference between either eye. If one of them gets infected or damaged, your immune system can attack your healthy eye and take away your sight entirely. Mom, come pick up, I'm scared. Rosemary Kennedy was JFK's sister. She suffered from oxygen deprivation at birth, and that unfortunately stunted her mental growth. She had a pretty decent childhood, but as she grew older she began to act out. Afraid that her behavior would risk his political career, her father, Joseph, agreed to have her lobotomized. Her mother, Rose, was against it and forbade him from doing it. So he did it behind her back when she went on a trip. After the operation, Rosemary's already low IQ was lowered even further, to the point she could no longer walk or communicate. Her family had her locked up in an institution and basically disowned her. They never visited and never publicly acknowledged her anymore. Rosemary died at the age of 86. Her mother never forgave her husband for what he had done. It's unknown if she had that low of an IQ, though she did have some brain damage at birth. She was functional enough to read and write, and part of the reason she was lobotomized may have involved sleeping around and being defiant. She had an active social life. Imagine being lobotomized because the general standard of the family was people like JFK and RFK and you weren't living up to it. Yeah, before the lobotomy her IQ was low for someone her age, but she was capable. After it, she couldn't really do anything. Well, when you're in a high-class family, you're expected to act a certain way. Yeah, only Kennedy males are allowed to act up. Remember that bath salts cannibal guy from a couple years back? He wasn't high on bath salts when he did that. That was just media speculation and bullshit. They only found pot in his system during the autopsy. We still have no idea why he flipped out. Cause he was patient zero for the zombie apocalypse that we didn't get. The men of the ship Essex, the true event that inspires the story Moby, avoided islands after being shipwrecked for fear of cannibals. The islands were settled and landing there would have brought salvation to the survivors. Ironically, because of this bypass, the men ran out of food and were forced to eat each other for survival. You know what's even creepier? 2 of the sailors were later rescued by an American ship. They were alone at sea for so long and had to cannibalize their crewmates to survive. When they saw their rescuers, they immediately stashed bones in their pockets. They didn't seem to care that they were rescued. They were obsessed with the bones of their fallen crewmates, so they can suck on the bone marrows. Even after they were on board the ship, they refused to depart from the bones and would even attack anyone who would come close. That sure does ratchet up the creepiness a notch. The bottom of Lake Superior is cold enough that the bodies of dead sailors just remain. They don't really decompose because it's at freezing temperatures, so they instead get a coating of adipocera, think that's how it's spelled, which is liquid body fat, hardened around them. Gordon Lightfoot wasn't lying when he wrote, "The lake never gives up her dead." Sarce the lake that never gives up her dead, ask a mortician. Elmer McCurdy was a failed Old West outlaw. His preserved body was put on display in a traveling carnival, and years later he was eventually assumed to be a mannequin until he was used on set for the TV show The $6 Million Man. His arm accidentally fell off during the shoot, revealing bone and muscle and that he was a corpse, not a mannequin. Police were called and the mummified corpse was taken to the Los Angeles coroner's office. On December 9, Dr. Joseph Choi conducted an autopsy and determined that the body was that of a human male who had died of a gunshot wound to the chest. The body was completely petrified, covered in wax, and had been covered with layers of phosphorus paint. It weighed approximately 50 pounds, 23 kilograms, and was 63 inches, 160 centimeters, in height. Some hair was still visible on the sides and back of the head, while the ears, big toes, and fingers were missing. The examination also revealed incisions from his original autopsy and embalming. Tests conducted on the tissue showed the presence of arsenic, which was a component of embalming fluid until the late 1920s. So for anyone wondering how they didn't know the corpse was real, it was because it was a corpse covered in wax to look like a wax dummy. After his blindfolded victims, the Golden State Killer would be super duper quiet and pretend like he was gone, and right when the poor victims would start to move towards the phone or try to untie themselves, he would scare the shit out of them. After listening to the many hours of his crimes being listened in court today, this is just a cherry on the horrible cake that is D'Angelo. One reason that crows and ravens are associated with death is because they would often follow armies as they marched to battle. Being both carrion birds and extremely intelligent, they realized that a large group of armed men marching on one direction meant that there would be a tasty meal of corpses to eat soon afterwards. That's actually pretty neat. I'd like to subscribe to Crow Facts, thanks. Thank you for subscribing to Crow Facts. Did you know that crows can speak English? Imagine being totally aware of someone performing CPR but you physically can't move or respond. Well, that's what happens when you get bitten by a blue-ringed octopus. You have approximate 6 minutes between being bitten and someone starting CPR to keep your heart and lungs functioning to ensure you survive, all whilst being totally aware of what is happening to you. Neurotoxins are fun. The really creepy thing about this is one story of a guy who got stung, got CPR performed on him and survived. But went blind because he was lying on his back, eyes open, unable to blink because of the paralysis, staring into the sun. Imagine lying there, unable to move, unable to communicate, the sun slowly burning out your eyes and you can't shut them. Your brain can play tricks on you to make you see monsters in the mirror, called the Troxler effect. The Troxler effect is an optical illusion that affects how you perceive things, both visually and mentally. So that was the lady in my mirror. The astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger most likely didn't die until they hit the water miles below the initial explosion. Astronaut and NASA lead accident investigator Robert Overmyer said, "I not only flew with Scobie, STS-51L commander, we owned a plane together, and I know Scob did everything he could to save his crew. Scob fought for any and every edge to survive. He flew that ship without wings all the way down, they were alive." I have a book of kids' science fiction stories, some of which in retrospect were really inappropriate for kids. In one of them, the major character is on a plane that keeps hopping around the world, only briefly stopping to refuel when absolutely necessary and staying out of the sunlight. Eventually you figure out that the sun is going through a massive solar flare phase and everything the direct radiation touches is instantly burned to a crisp. Only a few planes who were in the air and managed to keep ahead of the sunlight have survived, and they have to keep leaping ahead of the sun indefinitely, only able to hope the sun's activity settles down soon before they run out of airports with easily accessible fuel, food, and water.